Candace Owens tried steering the conversation until Jasmine Crockett showed up with proof, stood firm, and delivered a line that stopped everyone cold. The studio lights were blazing, makeup had already been touched up, and producers gave quiet signals behind the scenes. There they were, 4 chairs, 3 panelists, 1 moderator, everyone trying to appear at ease. Jasmine Crockett shifted slightly, not from nerves, but with intention. Her cobalt blazer stood out, the kind of color that made you pay attention. Sitting across from her was Candace Owens, legs crossed, smile sharp, eyes focused. This was Real America, an evening show on Waytex in Phoenix, known for its hard-hitting political debates. The show was never about finding agreement, it was where people came to make bold stands. The topic tonight wasn't new race in America, the justice system, political parties, but with Candace Owens on set, the topic took a backseat to her need for control. Congresswoman Crockett, the moderator, began. You've spoken about unequal treatment in our legal system, but people like Candace say the system works and that race is used too often as an excuse. Thoughts? Jasmine didn't move. She didn't raise her voice either. Her tone stayed steady and calm. The issue isn't that race is mentioned too often, she said. The issue is that it's ignored until it costs someone their life. Candace smiled tightly. It looked forced. With respect, Congresswoman, she replied. It's dangerous when leaders push this idea of victimhood, like every bad thing that happens to Black Americans must be due to racism. That's not true. I'm living proof. A few people off camera nodded. That's how it always began. Candace made herself the outlier, then acted like that erased the broader reality. But Jasmine was not here to be dismissed. She leaned in slightly. So you believe systemic racism is overblown? Candace's smile stayed in place. Absolutely. The numbers speak for themselves. There are more Black millionaires than ever. Top entertainers, powerful public figures, celebrated and successful. What we see now is people using victimhood as leverage. The moderator glanced toward Jasmine. She didn't answer right away. She let the silence sit until it felt like something in the room had shifted. Then she turned back to Candace. That's a bold position, Jasmine said. Because last night, I came across a public document that says something different. From 2007, believe a discrimination complaint, filed by you. There was a pause. Not dramatic, just direct. Candace blinked. Sorry, she said, laughing a little. I don't know what you're talking about. Jasmine didn't look away. She reached into her binder, took out a folded paper, filed with the Stanford Board of Education. She continued. You said you were the target of racial harassment in high school. Not only that, you filed for a settlement. Am I wrong? Candace opened her mouth but said nothing. The moderator leaned forward, uneasy. Let's try to stay civil. This is civil, Jasmine replied, voice still calm. I'm not attacking anyone, just asking how someone can spend years telling Black youth that racism isn't real when she once asked for protection from it. Now, the room felt different. The camera crew noticed. The producers noticed. Viewers at home had stopped flipping channels. Candace shifted in her chair. Her jaw tightened just slightly, but enough for those paying attention. That was a long time ago, she finally said. I was just a kid. But you told the truth, didn't you? Jasmine asked, her voice softer. Silence. Yes, I did. But that's not the point. It is the point, Jasmine said, cutting in. The truth does not expire. And Jasmine was just getting started. Candace had no idea how deep this would go. The silence on set stretched just a bit too long. Candace reached up, adjusting her mic, not because it needed it, but to buy herself a moment. Her smile, always part of the act, faltered. This is off topic, she said, trying to pivot. Bringing up something from my teenage years doesn't change how race is used politically now. Jasmine didn't flinch. It's completely on topic. You say systemic racism is exaggerated, that people claim racism to avoid responsibility. But when you faced it yourself, it was serious enough to take legal action, and serious enough for the system to pay you. Candace inhaled to respond, but Jasmine spoke first, calm and firm. You said you were harassed with racial threats, that the school failed to protect you, that you feared for your safety. And you were right. But let's not pretend you overcame racism by pretending it did not exist. You got justice by acknowledging it. There was a quiet murmur from the live audience, just barely heard. But it was there. The moderator looked unsure, glancing at the producers, then trying to move forward. Maybe let's steer back to current policy, Congresswoman, but Jasmine held the moment. This is about policy. We cannot talk about justice today. We keep acting like the past does not matter. Her past included. Candace exhaled quick and sharp. You do not need to know me. I know what you say, and that says enough. Candace sat upright, voice rare. Now, you are twisting my words. People grow. My views have changed. I have learned that far too many people use victimhood as a way to make money, and that keeps our whole community from moving forward. But you did not leave it behind, Jasmine replied. You used that moment to grow. You turned it into something bigger, but instead of helping others rise up when they are targeted, now, you tell them it is all in their heads. That landed. You could feel the shift not just in the room, but through every screen where people were watching. Candace shook her head again, laughed, but this time, the smile did not seem real. You are just trying to make me look like a hypocrite just because I am not still angry about what happened. No, Jasmine answered evenly. I am showing people that your story is not what you claim. You gained from the same system you now deny exists. There was a pause. Then Jasmine looked directly at the cameras. Here is the truth. Racism did not disappear just because Candace Owens found success. Pretending it is over does not help those still trying to graduate without being judged, or apply for work without changing their names, or just get through a traffic stop alive. One of the panelists, a former Arizona state senator, cleared his throat, clearly uneasy. Maybe we could shift to discussing some actual solutions. But the moment had not passed, not yet. Candace tried again. You really think you are helping? By making people see themselves as victims? I am helping them recognize their power, Jasmine said. Her tone stayed steady. No, you are helping people forget what was needed to gain that power. You are helping them forget that the fight did not end the day you got a platform. You tell them to stop complaining, but you filed a complaint. And you were right to. But the moment you got the spotlight, you forgot how it felt. The moderator tried to move to a commercial, but his hesitation gave it away. He knew this was the moment people would remember. But Jasmine was not finished, not until the contradiction was so clear the audience could not ignore it. Candace Owens built her reputation on being in control. Her interviews were known for being sharp. She never stumbled, never backed down. That was her image, the woman who always had the answer. But tonight, her pace was off. Jasmine Crockett was not shouting over her. She was not mocking her or turning it into a scene. She was standing firm and pointing out that Candace was not. Candace reached for a stat she had repeated many times. Black Americans are only 13% of the population, but they account for more than 50% of violent crime. That is not an opinion, it is from FBI records. Jasmine turned her head slowly. This time, her voice had a slight edge. You're really going to use that now? Quoting crime numbers like they tell the full story. They are facts not made up, Candace said. But those numbers leave out how the data is gathered, Jasmine responded. Policing is not neutral. Watching is not neutral. You know how many crimes go uncounted in wealthy white areas because they are dealt with quietly. But in poor black areas, every incident is recorded, every arrest made, every charge added. You have read the same research I have. Candace's voice grew sharper. You cannot justify violence based on what part of town it happens in. Jasmine leaned back. No one is justifying it. I am saying the system does not treat everyone equally. And you know that. You lived it when you were 17. For the first time in the whole segment, Candace looked unsure. She glanced at the moderator, who looked back, but offered no help. So she changed course. You know what is really tiring? Candace asked. Being told I am not black enough, or that I am some kind of sellout, just because I do not blame everything on racism. Jasmine stepped in without waiting. No one said you are a sellout. I said you are being dishonest. That is not the same thing. Candace leaned back, arms crossed. So people cannot have different views now? They can, Jasmine answered. But When you stand on a national stage and use your own experience to deny the pain of millions, it is not just a different view. You are selling them a false story with your name on the cover. Candace scoffed. I'm not selling anything. You are doing book tours. You are on every podcast, paid speaking events, selling an image, and part of that image means pretending you never filed that complaint, that you never needed support, that you were never hurt. Candace's jaw tensed. Her foot tapped. The camera caught it. The moderator finally leaned in. Let's move on. Oh, Jasmine replied flatly. We need to finish this point. The room quieted again, not tense, but alert. Every time you tell a young black student they are just making excuses, Jasmine said, you are forgetting that once you needed someone to believe you, to take your fear seriously, to speak for you, and now you call that kind of help weak. Candace stayed silent. I'm not here to win an argument, Jasmine continued. I'm here because a lot of people watching do not hear anyone speak to their real experiences. And I'm not going to let that be erased just because it sounds better in a headline. There was a pause. Everyone on set held their breath. No one was sure what would come next. Then Candace spoke, not with a direct reply, but a distraction. Well, she said, at least I do not cry on cue and ask for sympathy. That landed wrong. Jasmine laughed, not in mockery, not to insult, just the kind of laugh that comes when someone clearly runs out of meaningful words. I never asked for sympathy, Jasmine said. I asked for accountability, but if that is too much for you, and carry it myself. But Candace did not realize Jasmine had one last point to make, and it was one she could not walk away from. Candace tried to reset the tone. She sat straighter, adjusted her skirt, and turned toward the camera like returning to safe ground. I think what we are seeing here is political theater, she said. Congresswoman Crockett is more focused on going viral than telling the truth. Jasmine's hands rested calmly in her lap. She did not blink. She did not move. She simply looked at Candace like someone watching a mess while the source of the problem was still pouring. You keep calling this a performance, she said. But all I've done is ask questions you don't want to answer. No buzzwords, no noise, just facts. Candace gave a dry, dismissive laugh. The fact is, people like you need racism to keep your careers alive. Jasmine did not turn toward her. She looked at the moderator, then to the viewers. Let me be clear, she said, voice low but firm. I did not get elected by telling people they were powerless. I got elected by telling them they deserved better and then working hard to help them get it. Candace jumped in louder. No, you got elected by spreading fear and creating division, just like the others, and then it came. Jasmine looked at her, not angry, not smug, just steady. You can't rewrite history just because the cameras are rolling. That line stayed in the air, like a loud sound in a quiet space. Everyone heard it. Even the camera held still. Candace opened her mouth, then closed it. For once, she had no answer. Jasmine leaned in slightly, tone still calm. You filed that complaint because you were scared, because you were young, black, and targeted. And it was real. It mattered then, and it still matters now. But pretending, it never happened. Pretending you never needed help, that's not strength. That's survival. Pretending to be strength. Candace tried to shift gears. So now I'm not allowed to change how I see things. Of course, you can change, Jasmine said, but do not deny the truth to the very people walking the same path you once asked help on. Now, the moderator was silent. So were the other panelists. One of them reached slowly for a water bottle, like even the sound might break the moment. Candace spoke again, but this time, her voice was slightly higher. I'm not going to sit here and be told I betrayed my people. Jasmine raised her eyebrows gently. I never said that. I reminded you. That's what accountability looks like. Candace shifted again, then laughed, but it sounded more defensive. You know, I'd sat across from plenty of people trying to put me down. You're not the first. Jasmine's reply was quiet. I'm not trying to put you down. I'm trying to remind you that you are better than this. That line didn't land like a blow. It landed like a reflection. Because for a second, you could see it in Candace's face. A flicker, something in the mask slipped, and Jasmine didn't push it. She let it be. The moderator cleared his throat. We're going to take a break shortly. But before that could happen, Jasmine spoke up, her voice rising just a little. For the first time that night, I want to say something to the people watching at home. She turned to the camera, not to the panel, not to the crowd in the studio. To those sitting in kitchens, break rooms, and living rooms across the country. If you have ever been told that your story does not matter, if someone ever made you feel like you were imagining what they did not want to deal with, do not let them erase you. Do not let them smooth over the truth just because it makes them uncomfortable. You matter even when those with microphones act like you do not. She paused just briefly. While viewers took a moment to process, Candace was trying to catch her own breath. And the next few minutes only made things harder. Before the show went to commercial, the internet had already reacted. Clips from the exchange spread fast across timelines. Before the credits even rolled, someone in the control room had shared a raw feed, no edits, no cuts, just Jasmine Crockett, staying calm while Candace Owens struggled to respond to direct questions. The quote was already everywhere. You can't rewrite history just because the cameras are on. It hit like a shockwave. Memes, GIFs, hashtags, even usually neutral accounts were posting screenshots and short clips. No amount of spin could fix it quickly. Backstage, Candace paced the hallway, heels suddenly tight. Her assistant followed closely, phone in hand, quietly sharing updates. Trending on X, top 5 nationwide, over 4 million views on just one clip, the assistant said. Candace said nothing. She was too busy trying to reframe the moment in her head, trying to figure out where the control slipped, how Jasmine managed to keep hers. Meanwhile, Jasmine sat in the green room composed. She was not scrolling. Her phone buzzed next to her on the table, but she let it be. She had nothing to explain. She had not come to argue. She came to speak honestly, and the country had listened. Within an hour, political commentators were weighing in. One centrist radio host in Florida said, "I don't care what your party is, Jasmine Crockett did what we hope every elected leader does. She showed up, knew her facts, and stood firm." Another posted, "Candace Owens met someone tonight who did not play her game, and you could tell." But the strongest response did not come from analysts. It came from regular people, teachers, barbers, college students, and parents filling comment sections. "I've watched Candace for years. That's the first time I saw her truly caught off guard." Jasmine Crockett didn't yell, didn't insult, didn't dodge. She just told the truth, and let us see who could not sit with it. She said what many of us have waited to hear someone say on national TV for a long time. There was also empathy, but not for Candace. Viewers remembered the racial complaint Jasmine had brought up. Some searched and shared old news stories from Connecticut. Others found interviews, court records, and public documents. Everything lined up. Candace had once asked for protection. Now, she labeled that same fear as weakness. The pressure kept growing. Later that night, Candace posted a statement on her social media accounts. Part of it read, "I will never say sorry for growing and encouraging others to take personal responsibility. Yes, I faced racism when I was young. I moved past it not by staying stuck in it, but by refusing to let it define me. Some people cannot handle that kind of strength." But this time, the replies did not follow the usual pattern. Thousands responded with criticism. Growing does not mean pretending it never happened. Just because you got through it does not mean it no longer exists. You cannot use your growth to erase the truth of the road you walked. And under all that, Jasmine posted her own message. It was short. It did not even mention Candace. Truth does not need a headline. It only needs someone willing to hold it steady. 4 hours after the segment aired, Jasmine's clip had passed 15 million views across platforms. Even people who missed the show were now repeating her words. Back on set, producers were still in disbelief. "I knew it would trend," one said, "but I did not think it would land that hard." The host behind his desk, watching the footage again, looked up and said what many already felt. Candace brought the volume. Jasmine brought the evidence. But it was more than just a media moment. It felt deeper. And by morning, people were still asking why it struck such a nerve. It was no longer just a clip. It had become a moment, one that hit differently depending on where someone stood politically, socially, or personally. But one thing was clear: Jasmine Crockett had not only challenged Candace Owens, she had touched something bigger. In coffee shops across cities like Philadelphia, Detroit, Oakland, and Birmingham, people were still talking. The debate had moved beyond the screen. At a bus stop in Tulsa, one woman told her coworker she wasn't even angry. That's what made it land harder. She didn't yell. She just stood firm like she had done it before. Because she had. For many viewers, Jasmine was not just arguing, she was living what so many had lived. Being told something wasn't happening while it was. Being told to move on when the wound was still fresh. Being told they imagined it when the pattern was already clear. Jasmine had not come to talk in circles, she came to place the truth on the table and leave it there, even if it made others uncomfortable. Back in Washington, D.C., members of the House were starting to take notice too. Some of her colleagues had already started reaching out, others sent quiet messages. One staffer from a nearby district said Jasmine did not just win the exchange, she showed what accountability with grace actually looks like. That kind of thing is rare, but it was more than rare, it was overdue. So often, political debates on television turn into loud arguments, where the person who talks over others or speaks the fastest is declared the winner. Jasmine chose a different approach. She slowed things down, made the room quiet enough for the truth to be heard clearly. A young black woman in San Jose posted a video from her car. Her eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. I've watched Candace for years and always felt sick when she said people like me were just using race as an excuse. But hearing Jasmine bring up that old complaint, the same experience Candace tried to hide, it felt like, finally, someone said it clearly. We are not making it up. We are not imagining it, and we are not alone. That was what mattered. This was not about taking someone down. Jasmine was not there to tear anyone apart. She was there to remind people that covering up the past does not heal it, and staying silent does not mean peace. It just means someone stopped paying attention. The story especially connected with people working in schools, courts, and clinics, those who witnessed the pattern up close, where names on applications get skipped, where voices in meetings are ignored, where outcomes change depending on who is watching. A middle school teacher in Little Rock wrote this in her journal that night. My students ask me all the time if racism still exists. I used to avoid giving a direct answer. Tomorrow, I will show them the clip. It mattered because Jasmine was not there to prove herself. She did not need to. She stood firm while someone else avoided the truth and eventually stumbled over it. The takeaway was not about sides. It was not Democrat or Republican. It was not left versus right. It was simpler than that. If you go through something painful and later pretend it never happened just to look strong, you are not being brave. You are pretending, and people can tell. Candace had power, a platform, millions of followers, but what Jasmine had that night was something harder to earn: credibility. And credibility comes from being consistent, from connecting your past to your present without acting like the middle part never happened. That is why the moment stayed with people. It did not look like a takedown. It looked like someone finally saying what needed to be said without yelling, without attacking, without turning it into a show. But one big question still hung in the air, and it would shape how both women would be remembered after that night. The dust had not settled yet, but the difference between them was already obvious. Candace Owens quickly went into response mode. She did what she always does when under pressure. She turned to social media, recorded a podcast that same night, and sent out a stream of tweets meant to change the story. She said Jasmine's words were staged. She claimed the network had set her up. She warned her followers that the truth was now being treated as dangerous by the left. But this time, something was off. The responses did not come back as fast or as strong. Her followers were still. They're still vocal, but quieter than usual. Even they seemed to realize she had not left that debate with the upper hand. More importantly, people who were not usually part of her audience were not convinced by her version of events. On the other side, Jasmine Crockett did not go on a media tour. She did not appear on 5 shows. She did not tweet in all capital letters. She did not repost every compliment. She posted one photo, sitting calmly in the studio chair, hands folded, and wrote just 4 words: hold your truth steady. No hashtags, No jabs, just the same quiet focus she had shown the entire night, and that sent a different kind of message, one that stuck around longer than the noise. People started sharing it with captions like, "Strength is not loud." She was the adult in the room. She was not trying to go viral, and that is exactly why she did. There is something powerful about a person who knows they do not have to yell to be heard. And that is what Jasmine tapped into, a calm kind of power. The kind that does not chase the spotlight but is always prepared when it is given. Meanwhile, the conversation about Candace's past could no longer be ignored. People were digging into it again. Screenshots of her 2007 complaint were being shared. Quotes from the case, old articles, archived interviews. Not to shame her, but to remind people. This actually happened. She said it. She went through it. So why deny it now? That was the question being asked in newsrooms and in comment threads across the country. If you once asked for justice, why tell others not to? For many, this was no longer just about Candace. It became about the people in their own lives. The aunt who told them to toughen up. The uncle who said racism was over. The teacher who ignored what they heard in the hallway. Jasmine's words gave people a way to finally speak up. One woman wrote in a blog post, "I was raised to believe that naming racism made me look weak, that if I just worked harder, it would go away." Watching Jasmine call it out calmly, without fear, felt like someone finally stood up for the 17-year-old version of me. And still, Candace kept posting, kept replying, kept trying to reshape the story, but her words did not carry the same weight anymore. Not after people had seen the clip. Not after they saw someone calmly and clearly pull back the mask and show what was underneath. There is a difference between being loud and being remembered. Candace's style had always been volume, reaction, going viral. But now, people were starting to ask, what is left when the noise fades? Jasmine gave them an answer without saying it directly. Legacy is not built in one moment. It is built in how you handle that moment. A high school debate coach in Flagstaff played the panel recording for her students. She paused it right when Jasmine said, "I'm not trying to make you feel small. I'm trying to remind you you're bigger than this." Then she asked her students, "When it's your turn to speak, who do you want to be?" No one chose volume. And as the headlines kept moving and hashtags changed, one thing became clearer. Jasmine did more than win a debate. She drew a clear line between performance and principle. And the people watching, they saw it. Even with her name trending and clips going viral, Jasmine understood that the real impact was not in the views, but in the quiet shift happening elsewhere. It is easy to lose focus in moments like these, the likes, the trending posts, the instant reactions. But what stayed with people long after the clip aired was not just Jasmine Crockett's sharp responses or even that widely shared quote. It was the way she made truth feel steady again. In homes across the country, parents watched the clip with their kids not for entertainment, but as a teaching moment. A father in Columbus paused halfway through and told his daughter, "This is how you speak up without tearing yourself down." A grandmother in Fresno played it on her phone and said, "She reminded me of how we used to carry ourselves with dignity, even when angry." That was the part people kept talking about. Dignity. Not the kind rehearsed for cameras, but the kind you show when you keep your voice calm as someone tries to shake you. The kind where you stay rooted in what you know is true, without needing to raise your tone. Where you meet pushback with clarity and leave people thinking instead of shouting. Even some of Candace Owens's longtime supporters began having different kinds of conversations, not because they suddenly agreed with Jasmine on every point, but because they had seen something they could not unsee, a mirror they did not expect, a contradiction they could not explain away. And quietly, something started to shift. It was not a dramatic wave, not a movement. It was more like a change in the air, slow, steady, real. A college student in Madison wrote in her blog, "I used to admire Candace's confidence. Now I see it was just volume. Jasmine showed me what real strength looks like. When you stay calm, even when someone is trying to throw you off." People were not just reacting, they were thinking. That was the difference. Because what Jasmine did on that stage was not just respond to someone. She reminded people that holding on to your truth is not weakness. and that speaking in a calm tone does not mean you are not passionate. You do not need to yell to raise the standard. The lesson was never just about Candace Owens. She was part of it, sure, but she was not the point. The real lesson was for everyone who has ever been told to let go, to stop bringing it up, to stop being dramatic. Jasmine's message, without saying it directly, was, you are not imagining things. You are not exaggerating. You are not wrong for remembering what hurt. And more than anything, your story still matters, even if someone louder says it does not. In that moment, Crockett did more than defend herself. She defended people who never got the spotlight, who sat through meetings where their pain was ignored, who heard, maybe they didn't mean it, more often than, I'll leave you. And she did it with calm, with facts, with silence that said more than words. That is what stayed with people. In the weeks after, Jasmine's clip kept circulating not because it was flashy, but because it felt honest. People kept watching it like they were trying to remember how it made them feel. It reminded them, you do not need to be harsh to be clear. You do not need to match someone's noise to be heard. You just have to stand in what you know is true, and not flinch when someone tries to talk over it. And that is exactly what she did. As the buzz faded and attention moved on to the next trending topic, Jasmine Crockett went back to her work, back to committee meetings, back to listening to constituents, back to policy work with the same thoughtfulness she brought to that stage. She did not need to chase the spotlight. The moment had already done its job. It reminded people what courage really looks like: quiet, steady, grounded in truth. And in the end, that meant more than any headline. If this moment reminded you of something you have lived or helped you find the words to speak it, share this story. Do not let the truth fade into silence. Subscribe, stay aware, and always remember clarity lasts longer than noise.